One, welcome back to Millennium News 24 Power Talk Show. I'm here, your host Eric Stevenson. I'm with you today, and in our studio we have a distinguished, great woman with us, Diane Sayre. She's a candidate for the United States Senate here in New York. I'm sure she has a great platform, view, and perspective for the people of our state and of our country, which is like a breath of fresh air at this time, in the time of real need of a real good vision. And I'm sure she carries that, and we're going to get into letting her explain that after we go into our current events. Welcome, Ms. Sayre.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Sure. Couple of items we'll have on our current events today, and I'll ask you, Ms. Sayre, you could chime in on what your thoughts are. Number one on our agenda, we're talking about what many have been talking about, President Biden, how he's returning to South Carolina because he wants to show his determination to win black voters in 2024. Some said he has neglected the base. Some say some of the base was half with him, half against him. So he's determined to go show them that he's with them, and he's determined to win that base back. What do you think about it?
You're asking me?
Yes. What is your thought on that?
Well, when you said half with him, I thought you...
What some of the voters have expressed.
Right. No, I thought you were going to say half-wit, because I think that's what we're dealing with. I think we have a president who's not playing with a full deck, so to speak. And the country is in horrible shape, a horrible state of disrepair. And it's my view, as an American, as a candidate for U.S. Senate, I don't believe we actually have either an incumbent president or a candidate running for president who is prepared to address the crisis, because it really starts at the top with a group of billionaires in Wall Street and the City of London. And most people running for office actually don't want to take on that hornet's nest.
Well, he knows the Biden campaign knows that they won't win the red state, the solidly red state, but they feel that they want to lock up the black vote. So to me, that's like always looking to take advantage of people once again, So we'll see how it is when he arrives, and we'll see what the turnout will be. But he doesn't plan to win the state in November, but he wants to secure enough votes to add it up with the rest. But he wants to show that to the black community that he's there for them, and once again, he needs their support. Also, regarding in Chicago, two teenage boys were shot and killed leaving a Chicago school. The boys was ages 16 and 17. They don't have any motives out of yet. They say two suspects got out of two vehicles, fire shot at the group, and the boys died at the hospital. No immediate arrests were made. They don't know if it's gang violence related, but inside of right in front of a public school, cars pull up, guys come out, empty guns, run off, kill two boys.
I think, unfortunately...
There's too much of this going on.
Yeah, and our nation is spreading violence all over the world. We have a huge number of people with PTSD coming back from meaningless wars based on lies, which does incredible psychological damage. We also have the not merely decriminalization of marijuana, but full-on encouragement of recreational use of marijuana, which is known, especially these high THC levels, to induce paranoia, psychosis, and unfortunately, I don't think we have enough data on the connection between drug use and some of these violent crimes.
Yes, just and to see that it took place in Colorado, Florida, Connecticut, Texas. Now it's just like it continues, and a nation or a government fails to be able to correct it or prevent it, or even put out preventive measures to try to stop it, even though they get red flags at times, like this boy in Michigan. where the mother brought a gun for her son, and he went to the school and he killed someone. So, you know, they fell into react, and this is a real crisis. But yet, our Senate is there, our Congress is there. No one's saying nothing. The president is there. I mean, after the fact, they always make a press conference or a statement, but nothing is really being done, Ms. Sayre.
Well, I think that the media and our leadership actually tries to make us hate each other. Imagine if our government and the media was interested in making us love each other. If we had a shared mission, a sense of purpose, that we were going to rebuild an entire city or build a new city or make some major repair to some infrastructure that was badly needed, and we pulled in people from every walk of life, every imaginable background, and we pulled together in a common mission. There are ways that you can pull the population together where you stop having fear because someone perhaps looks different or you don't know them, or the economy is very difficult, the inflation is hitting people hard. So people tend to look at each other with suspicion from the get-go, and I think that we have to change the policy where we realize that our neighbors are our allies and partners.
So how would you propose that we would work to pull people together for a common cause?
Well, I'll tell you, I spent about 8 days in China in October for my 35th wedding anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. And the cities there, first of all, are huge. Beijing has, I forget if it's 23 million, and Shanghai is 30 million, but they're huge cities with a huge number of people. The cities are spotless. In Shanghai, we stayed in a hotel, and by the way, the hotels are much less expensive also.
Really?
And they power washed the sidewalk every day.
Wow.
And they had people taking care of all of the gardens. And I thought, take the unemployment among young people and the mess that is New York City, the garbage in the streets, the rats, the weeds, the broken down. What if we had a crash program for high school students? You could even have a competition to clean up the city, this school versus that school, who can do a better job.
That'd be creative,
yeah, let people do something they have some pride in. And pay them, don't use them for slave labor. I mean, we found $80 billion to bail out AIG. I'm sure we found how much, almost 200 billion now for Ukraine. I'm sure we could find something for American young people, wouldn't you think?
Well, if it's once it's a priority, you know, if you don't make it a priority, then it's not going to be a priority. Back in China, was that what the younger people doing the power cleaning, or?
No, it was people's job, although I didn't.
Actual job.
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't see a lot of really elderly people doing it. But what I saw is everybody had a role in the society, and they were proud of it and
The streets are
happy.
spotless.
They are spotless, and it creates, frankly, a high sense of morale.
That would be a great idea to try to do something like that, especially here in New York City. I think the garbage and the street cleaning and all of this could be done better, you know, and it doesn't take much. It just takes the government to make a priority, to put a little bit of funding, power cleaners and hoses, and like you said, run a competition and give an award to the younger people, maybe the high school students citywide in each borough or whatever. Let's do it by cities throughout the state and in our country. It would be it's a great idea. I'm just sorry that you know, we have to be talking about this instead of doing it, but we should really consider like enacting something like this very quick, especially as you look in the streets here in New York City. It's not, you know, it's uncalled for.
Well, it's needed, and I think one of the problems we're seeing, and we see it now, unfortunately, in the Middle East, people say, let's have peace. Stop killing. Stop the killing. Okay, but then what? And why and how? How do you bring an end to violence? It's not merely the absence of violence, because there's no such thing as stasis. There's nothing in the universe that is not changing. So you are either going to be moving forward or moving backward. You cannot just say stop and everything freezes. That is not It doesn't work in the universe. So you have to have a mission for mankind which is good, on which people can collaborate jointly, and then lo and behold, you discover that the guy you thought was your enemy has a particular talent that you don't possess that might come in handy for the mission.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely what it is. And as we're looking forward, I'm just wondering how we hold people together better in unity, and fight different discriminations and prejudices and stuff that exists, where people could all feel as human beings together, regardless of your background of race and what country you came from, whatever the case may be, your religion. We're all in this together, and we have to find a common road where we come together and establish world peace. We have a lot of people who may think it and wish it and talk it, but we need to really create it. What's going on in the world today, you have a lot of leaders, because of greed, is not doing right for their citizens of their countries, and taking money, so much money. Look at the African nations. They're suffering. People can't even eat. They go to a doctor, they can't even afford to fill a prescription because of a lack of money. And this goes on, and something, there has to be a cutting point somewhere where something is created. So I think you understand this, and
well, I think people actually have tolerated things that they had no business putting up with. So, they always tell the story about the frog, and I like frogs, so I'm not going to try the experiment. But if you put a frog in a pot of water that's cold and heat it to boiling, the frog doesn't jump out. If you drop it in the boiling water, yeah. So the population has been, oh, you have to make this little sacrifice. Oh, we just can't fix the roads. We just can't fix your school. And then if you take a step back and you look at what we are paying for, like I said, 200 billion are approaching weapons for Ukraine and funding the government of Ukraine, a nation with which we have no treaty obligation whatsoever, which is engaged in an aggressive war against Russia, not the other way around, or the funds we're sending to Israel, which I hope we'll get to that, has just been found in the International Court of Justice of perpetuating genocide in Gaza. Well, we have plenty of money to send to support genocide. Somehow we don't have money to support life of American citizens and children in the United States, in our major cities. And I also want to say the state of New York, apparently of the top 10 cities in poverty in the United States, 3 of them are in New York, starting with Syracuse, number 1.
Wow. We're going to take a break and return right back to Power Talk. Hello, viewers in America and across the world. This is Eric Stevenson, host of the Power Talk show on Millennium News 24. Tune in every week at Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, American Time, and also on all of your iOS and Android devices. Also on Smart TV and Apple, Amazon, and worldwide through Verizon Satellite, and also worldwide through www.millenniumtvnews.com, and that's www.millenniumnews24.com, and through our social media, Millennium News. See you then. For our Power Talk, I'm your host, Eric Stevenson, and we are once again joining the studio with Miss Diane Sayre, a candidate for the United States Senate of New York State here. She's been expressing a lot of great things here and a lot of great vision. So we'll continue. Ms. Sayre, a hot topic and a very critical issue that's going on worldwide now, as we all know, is the Gaza war. Recently, just recently airstrike. They just killed 3 Palestinians in southern Gaza as Israel presses on with its war against Hamas. It's come to a point in the international courts has declared Israel committing genocide. I mean, I know so much to say about it, but...
Well, if you don't mind, I'd actually like to read a couple sentences.
Sure, we need
this
to hear
is
it.
from the report filed by South Africa, and I have to say, the American news media is doing a great disservice to the American population. The Wall Street Journal claimed that the ruling, the finding of the International Court of Justice was a victory for Israel. Absolutely not. They found that Israel, and this is what the court ordered: 1, they shall take all measures within its power to prevent genocidal acts against Palestinians. 2, Israel will ensure that its army doesn't commit any genocidal acts. 3, Israel will prevent and punish public incitement to commit genocide against Palestinians. 4, Israel will ensure the provision of urgent services of humanitarian aid to Gaza. 5, Israel will ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of genocide. 6, Israel will submit a report to the court in 1 month showing its compliance with these orders. That does not sound like the court found they were not committing genocide. And what I want to say, because the South African report is absolutely airtight, it was an amazing job. Let me tell you what they say in this report, and they have pages and pages of footnotes documenting everything. Quote, Israel is said to be dropping dumb, i.e. unguided bombs on Gaza, as well as heavy bombs weighing up to 2,000 pounds, which have a predicted lethal radius of up to 360 meters and are expected to cause severe injury and damage as far as 800 meters from the point of impact. This weaponry is being deployed in one of the most densely populated areas of the world, where approximately 1 in every 100 people has now been killed. Now, this was from, their figures were from December 11th.
December 11th.
Now it's higher. It's over 1%. 1% of the American population, just to give our listeners a sense, would be 3.3 million dead Americans. That's what we've done. And I just want to share one other little section because this is so horrific. They say in this report, Palestinians have been wounded in Israel's military attacks on Gaza since 7th October 2023. The majority of them women and children, about 70% women and children, I'll say. Burns and amputations are typical injuries, with an estimated 1,000 children having lost one or both legs. There are reports of Israeli forces using white phosphorus in densely populated areas in Gaza. As the World Health Organization describes, even small amounts of white phosphorus can cause deep and severe burns, penetrating even through bone, and capable of reigniting after treatment. Can you imagine? This is a war crime.
Yes.
And there is plenty of documentation. And I will say that I only watched 1 hour of the 3 or so hours that Israel presented their defense. Yeah. I did not hear, in the hour I watched, that lawyer never once refuted any of these charges. All he talked about was how horrible October 7th was. And I think Israel didn't want to bring up the specific crimes they are committing because South Africa has the proof, and they didn't want that then also
to open up
put before the eyes of the world. But that is what is going on. And I'm sorry, but I'm really angry at our Congress.
No, you should be.
I want to look. I wrote a statement called "The Congressional Wall of Shame: Why I Stand with South Africa and the Actual Interest of the United States of America." I may be going out on a limb. I don't think it's in the interest of the United States to support genocide. I'm sorry, and frankly, it's not.
So why is it that the president, Biden, continue to send tanks and ammunition to fuel this war if he's suggesting a ceasefire?
Well, that's a very good question. I think we have to ask Biden. I can't answer it because I can't find any possible answer to that question. Now, I wrote this statement in response to a letter sent to Tony Blinken by 210 or so congressmen, including 14 from New York, who say this, quote, and I don't know if they never read this or they just think because South Africa is in Africa, they just don't know what they're talking about or whatever. They write, "Dear Secretary Blinken, South Africa has filed a grossly unfounded case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, accusing Israel of genocide and asking the court to order Israel to immediately halt its military efforts in Gaza. We write to you to express our disgust at the filing, which perpetrates false and dangerous allegations against the Jewish state."
Wow.
Yeah. So who signed this? I want to tell you.
How many senators of New York, you say?
14 congressmen, including Richie Torres. Okay. Anthony D'Esposito, Andrew Garbarino, Dan Goldman, Nick LaLota, Nick Langworthy, Mike Lawler, that's my congressman, he's horrible, Nicole Maliotakis, Grace Meng,
Really? Wow.
Marcus Molinaro, Joseph Morell, Elise Stefanik, Claudia Tenney, and Brandon Williams.
Wow, Kim Jeffries, so.
No, he didn't. Isn't that interesting?
Surprisingly, yeah.
I think they are going to go down in history because South Africa basically won their case.
Yeah,
so the International Court determined that there is genocide, and you have 200 congressmen now on record supporting genocide. This is a very big deal. I think we can't stress it enough.
The problem is the court ordered Israel to halt the killings. It came short of saying, actually, you have to stop the war right now, but they asked him to prevent further killings of civilians and the bombings. But the court fails to have the power to enforce.
Correct.
So, my thing is this seems to be set up in a way where you have a court. If you look at a Supreme Court, a criminal court, they have enforcement powers, right? Now, here you have an international court that ruled Israel has committed genocide and ordered them to cease, to stop. And yet, Israel basically said, well, we'll stop after we finish fighting the war. But yet, the international court has no power of enforcing this.
But the UN does. And see, here's the thing of thinking a little bit like Shakespeare and recognizing the power of natural law. In Macbeth, is it Macbeth? Or Hamlet. It's Hamlet who says, "Murder, though it hath no tongue, will speak," when he tries to ensnare his uncle and his mother by having them watch a play about the murder. You cannot violate natural law. This is in history. It has been spoken in the universe.
But it's a clear violation.
And the UN Security Council will now be meeting on Wednesday, which does have power to enforce. And here's the problem. Here's the quandary for our friend Joe Biden. Will the U.S., in the face of international law, because Biden was put in a very prickly position and the press asked him, well, what do you think about the court? Oh, well, the case has no merit, but I respect international law.
Is that what he said?
Basically, he said, I don't think that this has, but I do respect the court. Because how can he run around saying rules-based order and then not respect the court at The Hague? So Wednesday, this is, as the Palestinian ambassador to the UN said, fasten your seatbelt, because this will come up again in the UN Security Council for a vote. The U.S. vetoed the ceasefire before. Will the U.S. veto a ceasefire now that it has been established that genocide is being committed, and that has legal implications because we can be found complicit in that genocide?
Well, that would be hypocritical if they do it again. And now it would would be a shame in the face of the world if America does do such a thing, because now they're going against international court ruling.
Correct.
Where they usually uphold and everybody participates and respects the ruling of the international court. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. That's on Tuesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. So we're going to stay tuned on Wednesday and see exactly what the U.S. Does, what's their position on this. But like I said, Israel is continuing to say they care nothing of what the international court says. They're going to continue to defend themselves. I think they have beyond defended themselves, way beyond defended themselves. And the whole world probably agrees to this now. And so let's see what kind of action could be taken as far as stopping it now. Meanwhile, the end of the last of the hospitals are destroyed. There's no anesthesias for those in pain who is rushed to a medical facility, which is very limited now. So it's basically, they said they basically have to dig the graves at the hospitals to bury people because there's no medical help that they can get. Lack of supplies, power, electricity, medicine, anesthesia, etc. So, and as we sit here and talk more and more, it's continuing to go on as we speak. And at least South Africa had the will and the guts to stand up and say enough is enough. No one else will speak, but we're going to speak. So we commend South Africa for standing up as a humanitarian nation to speak against this and bring this case. But we're going to take another break and return right back. Stay tuned. Hello, viewers in America and across the world. This is Eric Stevenson, host of the Power Talk show on Millennium News 24. Tune in every week at Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, American Time, and also on all of your iOS and Android devices. Also on Smart TV and Apple, Amazon, and worldwide through Verizon Satellite, and also worldwide through www.millenniumtvnews.com, and that's www.millenniumnews24.com, and through our social media, Millennium News. See you then. Welcome back to Power Talk TV right here, Millennium News 24, with candidate for the U.S. Senate, Diane Sayre. We're back in a very critical, hot discussion on this war in Gaza, and the UN resuming back Wednesday to once again take a vote and to see what our nation is going to do this time around, if we're really going to stick to mean what we say and vote for a ceasefire immediately, and we'll wait and stay tuned for that. As we mentioned, it's just beyond mentioning what's going on. Our news stations are only showing very limited things that's taking place in Gaza, but if you look at some of the other media outlets to see the actual findings of what's going on, you would be it's very shameful, and you'd be very hurt to see such actions being taken, the way the bombings are happening, the way little kids are being ushered to hospitals inside of whatever ambulances they have, with a leg removed, arm removed, mothers killed, mothers burying their children on the spot. Innocent people. Has nothing to do with Hamas. These are innocent people who live their day-to-day lives in Gaza, who's waking up, finding their homes blown up, etc., has no support whatsoever of creating harm against Israel. They just want to live an everyday, normal, peaceful life. Regardless of what Hamas has done, there's a separation between them and Hamas as to what Hamas has done. Many of them don't even support the efforts of Hamas and their aggression against Israel. But they're paying the price for it, and they're paying actually their life. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and that's a violation of international law. I mean, that's a collective punishment is against the law internationally. You're not allowed to do it. And I would say from the South African case, the other thing they do is they say, okay, it appears that genocide is being committed, do the Israelis actually intend to commit genocide? So they also include, again, totally documented, quotes from Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. On the 13th of October, he said, quote, "We are striking our enemies with unprecedented might." And this is after they had already killed 2,600 Palestinians, including 700 children.
2,600 or 1,000?
This was early on, only one week after, 1 week after.
First week.
Yeah, the first week. He said that Israeli soldiers, quote, "understand the scope of the mission and stand ready to defeat the bloodthirsty monsters who have risen against Israel to destroy us." And he also keeps quoting from Amalek, which is a biblical passage, which says, this is the instructions of the prime minister to his soldiers: "Go attack Amalek and proscribe all that belongs to him. Spare no one, but kill alike men and women, infants and sucklings, oxen and sheep, camels and asses."
Wow.
Yeah, that's the instruction from the prime minister to the Israeli Defense Forces. So what South Africa is doing is not only showing that genocide is being committed, but that there is an intent to commit genocide. It is not an accident or a byproduct of a war against Hamas.
And he wants to use a quote from the Bible?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the Old Testament.
With the Old Testament?
Yeah.
That's, I wonder if God really approves of that. But anyway, also, you know, I mean, it's so much, we could go on for days talking about this Gaza war. But we're going to see, and stay tuned Wednesday to see what happens at the United Nations and what they decide. Also, Ukraine says it has no evidence for Russia's claim that dozens of POWs died in a plane that was shot down.
I think Ukraine so far does not have a very good record of telling the truth about what's going on. And we know our own Pentagon failed its latest audit, so that Americans really have no idea where all these weapons are going that we're sending over there. Russia, on the other hand, has been quite transparent about what they're doing. They haven't done things that they didn't announce before the fact, like when Putin began the special military operation. He explained very clearly why he was doing it. In war, there's always some confusion. People have reasons for revealing certain things and not others. But there is no basis whatsoever to believe anything that the Zelensky regime tells us.
That's always a two-sided story, but this is what they're saying and claiming. But I think you have a point, and you may be right about what you're saying. Also interesting enough, as you know, was Holocaust Remembrance Day yesterday. And in Bosnia, interesting enough, Muslims and Jews have joined together in peace to observe their Holocaust Remembrance Day and call for peace and dialogue. Now, this takes great strength to do, but this is a humanly thing that was done. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's very, very possible. You know, I worked for 35 years with Lyndon LaRouche, who in the 1970s drafted a plan called the Oasis Plan, which was based on credit from the Ba'ath Party of Iraq to the various of the peace factions in Israel, with whom he was in contact. And the idea was that the number one issue in this region is not oil, but water. That you have to green the desert. You have to create a way where people see a concrete benefit of getting along, of working together. How about doubling and tripling your agricultural capacity? And also water is crucial in industry as well. Henry Kissinger actually flew to Paris personally in 1975 to stop negotiations on this plan, and a version of it reappeared in 1993 in the Oslo Accords with Rabin and Arafat. Rabin was very emphatic. And I mean, here's two guys who both had spilled and shed a lot of blood. Two military figures saying, we cannot continue this way. Peace has to be, we have to change our axioms, said Rabin. And he had a whole series of infrastructure development proposals. He said Israel, Palestine, there were plans ultimately to figure out a Palestinian state. That got scuttled. Jordan, the whole region could be a powerhouse of prosperity and development. And LaRouche warned, he said, if the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank don't get the money in there right away, we don't get shovels in the ground tomorrow, this will drown in blood. And not that much longer, as two years later, Rabin was assassinated by people incited by the current Prime Minister, Netanyahu. Exactly. But there is a pathway to peace by nature that we are all human and we have more in common with each other than we have differences. And so I think it's possible. I think Bosnia, that's a very good example. I also think South Africa is a very good example.
Oh, great example. But in Bosnia, I think that the Muslims and the Jewish community are showing the world that here we are as Muslims and Jews, and we live amongst each other in peace, and we actually joining the slaughter of Jewish people through the Holocaust together as Muslims with them, but yet, or they would like to send a message or an example to Israel to let them know that this picture is not about a religious war on the side of some. But according to what is happening, what you just talked about, the gentleman that was killed, Rabin, that was killed, assassinated, it is those who generally want peace and try to prevent war and bloodshed. But then you have warmongers who speak peace or talk peace, but their hearts are not of peace. So they seem to be sheeps and wolves in sheep's clothing. And their mission and their vision, whatever it may be, is not peace. And what we're seeing off the side of Israel is coming from them is not, or at least from the leadership, is not peace. I know many of the Israeli people in the country want peace. Many of the rabbis have expressed it already, want peace. Even a good percentage of rabbis right in Israel has expressed ceasefire. But yet, leadership disregards the rabbis. Religious people of the book, of the Torah, of the Old Testament, God's vision say we need to have peace and we need to cause for ceasefire. Leadership disregard. Yet they quote from the Bible for what interests them, but it's not peace. So moving along, we have to, the example was set that the world may take some type of example from Bosnia community as to what happened and to the leadership and the uniting of people as human beings and stopping the war and stop making a division between religions, because this will be an ongoing war as long as we're here on this planet if we don't do something about it and keep sowing division and hatred, because that's exactly what it is. And the hatred is only costing people's lives more and more and more. So we have to take example from the good who wants good and follow through on it.
I'd like to also add something, which is at Christmas, Bethlehem is the birthplace of Jesus Christ. Bethlehem, look at a map, is in the West Bank. It is occupied. And there was a minister there, Reverend Isaac, with the Evangelical Lutheran Church, who gave a very powerful sermon about the fact that you have the birthplace of Jesus Christ, which cannot celebrate Christmas because of the carnage and the devastating loss of life. And in Bethlehem this year, and it may be the first time in 2,000 years, who knows, they did not celebrate Christmas. They, of course, observed it, but they had silence, prayer, mourning. They made a creche with the baby Jesus under rubble. And he has raised the question, which I think is very relevant for Americans who call themselves Christian: why are you silent? Why are religious leaders in the West silent in the face of documentable genocide, including in the very birthplace of Jesus Christ?
Very good point. Very good question. I wish I had an exact, I would love to see the answer to that question, the true answer to it, you know? That's a very good point, because you have too many religious institutions and states and countries that surround the Gaza area. Like you said, the birthplace of Jesus himself in Bethlehem, and we are the religious leaders. Is it fear that silences them? Is it, I mean, I would love to know. I would love to interview some of them and ask them. But it's, and where's Egypt on it? Right next door, the border. Where's Jordan? They said they don't want to get involved. It's right there next door. So how do you not speak up for your brother man or your fellow man and your neighbor in the act of genocide? If you don't want to get involved to even speak and vote in favor of ceasefire, or even making some statement of how it's wrong, and if more pressure and more people are standing up, maybe we could get some or have some change. And religious leaders, it's just it's a question mark. What is going on? So I'm glad you brought that point up. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back, and we'll get right into more of the show. Thank you.
Welcome to the world of Millennium News 24. We bring news, we analyze news, and we make a bridge between you and the eventful world. 24/7, Millennium News 24 team is at your service. Don't miss today's America, Editorial Today, and Global Democracy with host Tofader Noor. You also won't want to miss Todd Goldfinger's show, Goldfinger Music Hour, Noon News with host Todd Goldfinger. And to stay connected with all top and trending news, don't even miss Millennium News Hour with host Tanziba Nouri. Millennium News 24 is available to be watched free for all LED TVs such as Sony, Samsung, LG, Roku TV, Amazon TV, and Apple TV. And also in all European countries and Australia, available with the Sky Network, Worldwide Jago TV, Radiant IPTV, Worldwide Jago BD Network, and Horizon Satellite globally. Millennium TV 24 News, news you need to know.
Power Talk here on Millennium News 24, and Eric Stevens. I'm your host with Diane Sarah. So we're back. We went over several topics. We talked about this genocide charge against Israel and this war in Gaza that needs to be dealt with. A ceasefire needed to happen like months ago, and we still haven't had it. So we're hoping for the best, and we're hoping that good-minded and good-hearted people finally get the strength to stand up. And those believers in the faith of the books or whatever your religious book is of God, that you stand up for God, because He's watching over all in all of our actions. And those who stay silent is as guilty as those who commit the crime. So we need to stand up and express our voice and our opinions and calls for this ceasefire right now. Well, Ms. Sarah, you're a candidate for the United States Senate here in New York. I appreciate your views today that you've given. It's like a breath of fresh air. I don't think many people on Capitol Hill would even express what you just expressed or even read or mention what you just did. So it shows where you're coming from and your strength and guts to stand up for truth. So why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for the U.S. Senate?
Well, thank you. I am a 33 5-year political activist, but I was trained to be a classical musician. I went to New England Conservatory after being at Hamilton College here in New York for a bit. I worked with Lyndon LaRouche, who ran for president 8 times and was railroaded in a kangaroo court and sentenced to 15 years in prison. And Henry,
is that what happened to him?
Yep.
Oh.
And he spent 5 years in federal prison.
Wow.
And Henry Kissinger made it known to the president's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board that LaRouche should not even be released on parole, which he was, thankfully. But in 1986, 400 U.S. Marshals, FBI agents, armored vehicle carriers, helicopters surrounded LaRouche's home. We learned later through a FOIA request with the intent to assassinate him. And LaRouche managed to get a telegram through to Ronald Reagan, who was on his way to meet with Gorbachev, about LaRouche's proposal to end nuclear war by developing the laser defense system, which the press stupidly called Star Wars. At any rate, Reagan ordered them to call it off. This was the Bush wing, the William Weld wing of the Department of Justice, and others who wanted LaRouche eliminated. They then shut down all of LaRouche's publications in an involuntary bankruptcy, arrested about a dozen people. One of my associates was given a 77-year jail sentence for
what?
taking political loans and not having a stockbroker's license. And they made up the crime, securities fraud, after they indicted him. He was offered a plea bargain. Just say you're guilty and you don't have to go to jail. He said, no way, you're going to use that to shut down our whole movement. He refused to plea. His own lawyer turned against him and ordered a psychiatric examination, which he passed. The judge wouldn't let him fire his lawyer, and he was convicted and spent 11 years in prison. And I say
and
this.
what happened after the 11 years? Because he had
He's
a 77-year
out. He was on
sentence.
parole for a while, and
But he had a 77-year sentence?
Yeah, he did.
So did he get a time reduction?
I think so. I don't know how all the details. I know that what LaRouche's wife then, he passed away, by the way, in 2019. But
LaRouche?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. His wife organized an international outcry over the case. I myself gathered signatures of about 20 members of parliament in Burundi. We were getting leaders all over the world, elected officials all over the world, to send letters to then Attorney General Janet Reno, to the White House, to Bill Clinton, who was president then, the Congress, saying this is a political case, it's a political prisoner. We had hundreds of state legislators in the U.S. who signed these public letters. We took out ads in the Washington Post. And ultimately, we did get everyone out of prison. But it was a very difficult time for the association.
I remember seeing his pamphlet years ago and actually signing a petition years ago. It's over 15 years, that's for sure. Probably about 25 years ago.
Yeah. We just passed the anniversary of him getting out of prison 2 days ago, 30-year anniversary of that. He got out in 1994. No, so I say that as part of who I am, because I want people to know that I will not buckle. I am not a coward. I am prepared to stand up for my views and speak them freely. That may mean that I'm not allowed to get lots of money or television coverage or the things that people think, but I think that therefore the people have to also take responsibility for the direction of the nation. And LaRouche was an absolute genius physical economist. That is the number one area that's not being addressed really at this moment, and people see it. We have hyperinflation. They tell you, oh, we're solving hyperinflation. How are you doing that? Oh, we're raising the interest rates. Well, that's great. Can you get a new car? Can you pay a mortgage? No, forget it. So the only way to stop inflation is you have to increase production. You have to employ more Americans in producing goods, which will give the dollar increased power. There was a time in this country where on the average wage, you paid your mortgage or your rent in 1 week's pay.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen now, and people now can't even imagine that. Now, the average cost of living is more than the average income.
Yes.
So the more you work, the more in debt you are. And that's why I'm saying we actually are going to be presented with a great opportunity, because this big bubble, this house of cards of Wall Street and the City of London, is headed for a major crash. And it means, rather than begging for crumbs, we could say, let's do what Alexander Hamilton did after the American Revolution. Let's get rid of this Federal Reserve, have a national bank. Let's reinstate Glass-Steagall. Let's separate the banks. Let's break them up by function. And let's issue credit. Instead of $200 billion to Ukraine, what could $200 billion fix in the United States? I think the NYCHA repairs are $40 billion. So we could take that. Or I spoke with someone where I was speaking. There was a woman who lives in those buildings, and she said, well, I don't think we should fix them. I think we should just rebuild the whole thing.
She's probably right.
I think so. Yeah. I don't think, but we have to get a government you can trust, because otherwise they'll just move people out and never let them. They'll rebuild something and bring a bunch of rich people back.
Well, that's what they would love to do. Yeah.
Right.
And probably that's a plan that they're looking down the road to do, because they're trying to phase out some in NYCHA housing now. Because a lot of the NYCHA properties will make some great development sites for private developers to do private housing there.
Right.
You know?
No, they have turned us into cash cows. We don't have much cash, so I would say we're debt slaves. And it's the migrants, they're debt slaves too. I don't know if this is true, that they're paying $1,400 or $1,600 per migrant seat on the bus. That could be happening. I know in one case in Oneida, we were told that someone who was operating a warehouse where they were housing 50 migrants with one bathroom, the owner was being paid $5,000 a head for these people.
Oh, without a doubt, there's a money-making scheme involved in all aspects. Even the hotel owners are getting paid. They love it. They hope
top dollar.
Oh, forget it. But they hope that more and more by the thousands come in, because their hotels are filled to capacity where they were not getting as much business, and not only to capacity, the rate of that they're getting per migrant per day is like 3 to 4 times the actual daily rental of the room. So they're making like so much money off of the migrants.
Right.
So what would you do as a U.S. Senator once elected in New York? What would be some of the first things you will work on?
Well, first and foremost, we have to take on this Wall Street monstrosity, because if you don't address that, you can't get anything else under control. And you know, FDR had the Pecora Commission, where he actually put bankers in jail, which was very important, because otherwise the bankers say,
gotta shape them up.
Yeah, and also it moralizes people, because the bankers always say, oh, it's those poor people who don't want to work that are causing. No, it's because you're committing theft and fraud, right? Glass-Steagall, the separation of the banks, urgent. We have to have a protected savings and loan commercial banking system. I remember as a child, when I opened a savings account, I think I was 11 years old, I went to the bank with my little plastic yogurt container. I'd put all my Christmas money in it. It was $70 or something. I got 5% interest in my savings account. Oh, that was a bit. I
remember opening up the clubs. For the holidays, you would be able to open them up at the bank, and you would get your check at the end of the beginning of the holiday season to have money to spend. And all of that thing is gone
right,
now.
Now you pay for the privilege of letting the banker gamble with your money and lose it all. So that's number one. We got to take that, and we've got to remove the veneer of respectability from people like Jamie Dimon, who's just a crook.
What would you do about the housing crisis in the state? As you know, as you just talked about, 1 week's pay would actually pay your rent, et cetera, your food bill, or you would have 3 weeks pay left for the month to save or to put aside for your child's schooling or whatever the case may be. But unfortunately, those days are gone. We're not going forward, we're actually going backwards. But what would you do about the housing crisis?
Well,
how would you deal with it?
You have to regulate it. See, this is where I know a lot of people, the government's too big. Well, no, I mean, maybe it is too big. There's too many bureaucrats there. But it's not too strong, it's too weak. The government is emaciated. It's like this little tiny chihuahua with this giant billionaire blob sitting on it, dictating what it does. So I think we have to use the governmental powers to regulate things. And I know landlords who don't own huge amounts of property are being taxed out of existence. Madison Square Garden doesn't pay property taxes. Yankee Stadium doesn't pay property taxes. Your landlord is being made to pay enormous tax rates, and then they pass them on to the tenants who can't afford them. And they don't make repairs.
But that's pricing people out. It's putting people into homelessness. It's putting people into the shelter system.
Well, that's why I'm saying you have to regulate it, because the government can stop that immediately. If you stop this inflation, you have to have a ceiling on rents in certain areas, etc.
Do you think it's too late to reverse that?
No, it's never too late. We can address it. We need to. It's going to have to be
so
case by case. So we can get back
to affordable. We can get back to real affordable housing. You believe?
Yeah, I think you have to do it on a local level. I don't think you can have Washington dictate to every city. You're going to have people who live in those cities determine what's a fair price. They're going to have hands-on involvement of this.
Well, that's definitely is one of like the major issues, because so many people are now forced to join in splitting apartment sharing, or someone's actually having to leave and go into shelters, families, because of the high cost of rents now. And it's unfortunate. And then you have the migrant crisis that crashes in to the people who's already here who have to go into the shelter system. So it's whoever gets through the door first. Is like a race, and they crash at the door. So overflow at the shelter systems. Not enough housing is being built to house the people. So it's a real housing crisis, and that's like so important, of course, with the economy and dealing with this inflation, how it's going to balance. You just gave a great idea how to put the ceilings and the caps and try to balance this out. But we have about 2 minutes left on the show. We probably need to have you 3 or 4 or 5 more times. But in closing, I'll let you address the viewers as to why they should vote for you for the U.S. Senate.
Well, thank you so much. As I said before, because I'm not a coward and I'm not going to sell you down the river, I would urge people to visit my website, which is SARE, S-A-R-E, SARE4Senate.com. You can sign up to volunteer. You can sign up to donate, to get active, to host a town hall meeting. I am actually establishing Friends of SARE in every state of the United States, because I think we need a national campaign to get the policy through to change the country, to get out of war and start building for peace.
Well, we thank you, Ms. Sarah, for coming on the show, addressing your views and opinions here. I hope the listeners enjoyed what they heard. Like I said, a breath of fresh air, new perspective. It's a needed perspective. And we thank you for coming. And I believe we need, if we have 10 of her or 20 of her, we would change the future of this nation and this world. So you decide that. But you hear what she said. You know what we need. And I think she has some great points on that. And we need 20 of her, and we would change this world. Thank you for tuning in to Power Top on Millennium News 24. We look forward to you again next week. And thank the viewers all. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.